Okay, well, 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and get started with tonight's Tradition Talks from the Association for Cultural Equity. I am very pleased that we're joined tonight by Marcus Trevor McIntosh, founding director of the Grenada Sports Wellbeing Foundation. Trevor lives on Carriacou, an island in the Caribbean nation of Grenada, and he's a leading figure in Carriacouan cultural heritage through his work with youth around sports and folk traditions, and really looking forward to our hearing from him tonight about that work. And as we go along, please feel free to put questions in the chat box if you'd like for Trevor to address them all. We'll keep an eye on those questions and pass them along to him. So I'd just like to say a few words first about the Association for Cultural Equity, or ACE, before we launch into the discussion. And also a reminder that this is being recorded for use on YouTube later. My name is Sarah Bryan. I'm the executive director of ACE. Our organization was founded 40 years ago by the pioneering folklorist and ethnomusicologist Alan Lomax, who, as many of you know, spent his career of over half a century recording the music and the other traditional heritage of people all around the world, and ACE is proud to steward that legacy. And we work toward the ongoing documentation and preservation of all people's cultural heritage. And I want to encourage everyone to visit our website if you haven't before. That's culturalequity.org, to explore the literally thousands of recordings on the Lomax Digital Archive, Global Jukebox, as well as our online exhibits and other resources. So our Tradition Talks series is a platform to present speakers who are doing cultural heritage documentation in really new and innovative ways. And that brings us to Trevor McIntosh, who we want to welcome today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me onto this forum tonight. And I thank everyone that's viewing this show. And hopefully I could answer some of the questions that you're going to throw at me tonight and make it good viewing.
Well, tell us, please, just a bit about yourself first and a bit about your foundation.
Well, I was born in London, and at the age of 3 to about 6 months, I came to live in Carriacou with my grandparents, because back then in London I would say it was very tough for people who migrated to London back in those days, in the early 60s. So I came to Carriacou to grow up with my grandparents in Carriacou, and went to school here for a short period of time till about 6 or 8 years of age, and then finally made that journey back to the UK. And making that journey back and getting to London was a brand new experience for me from where I came from, in Carriacou. So I must admit that the first couple of years was very tough for me to settle, because it wasn't things that I was used to. And getting back there to know that, because back in Carriacou, I thought my grandparents were my parents. You know, and then when I get to the UK, I find that I have a family, you know, which to my surprise was quite hard to kind of understand and grasp. But as time went on, you know, your parents explained to you the situation and why they had to do what they had to do, in order for themselves to order survive. You know, and then later on you go to school and, you know, you start to understand what London was about. And I went through my formative years of school in primary school, and then later secondary education. And then from there, you know, I got into sports in my early age. And I was one of the guys that wanted to probably play all the sports on earth. Every time I saw something on the TV, I wanted to play. And luckily for me, growing up in the area of where I grew up in an area called Fulham, there was a park, literally a stone's throw away. And it was very good to live near a park, to see open space, because coming from Carriacou, that was all I saw. So I would go and sit on the bench and watch all these other kids play whatever sport it was, or when I'm in school, it was watching these, because in Carriacou, all what we did was play was athletics. You know, we just run. That was it. And cricket, they were the only two sports that we ever saw to play. So when I got to London and I saw all these different types of codes of sports, I became fascinated with it. So one day at school, I would learn to play rugby. I would learn to play cricket, football, or in your term, soccer, hockey. And I would always look to want to buy a football or a cricket bat. And it was good that I had older cousins who had some of this equipment for me to play. But I had to then find myself of what sport that I will be drawn to. And the three sports that I was actually drawn, well, four to be quite honest, was cricket, athletics, because I had already known those two by living in Carriacou. And then I got to start playing rugby. And then I got to play football or stroke soccer. And all four of it, I was very good at it, you know, because coming from the Caribbean and from Carriacou and stuff, you had that natural athletic ability, which helped me to play these sports. But it got to a certain point where, you know, you have to find your way, and I end up playing football, or what you call soccer, to a highest point and where of the highest standard that I could. And later on in life, it took me around various countries in the world to play. Then later on in my career, I ended up went into coaching. And that took me to different parts of the world as well, which eventually took me out to Australia, for where I worked for several years. And then eventually the call-in came for me to work back where I actually spent my earlier years, and which I thoroughly enjoyed coming back, because it gave me a purpose to get back to where I first started my earlier life. And I think that sometimes in life they say, there's a saying that you always return back to what you know. And I returned back to what I know, which is coming back to Carriacou.
And I'd like to circle back to more about sports, but would you tell us a bit about the process of coming back to Carriacou, and also some of the traditions that you and your family have been involved in, how you sort of came back to those traditions, if you had ever, you know, fallen out of them. But what was that process like, that adjustment?
Well, when I got back to Carriacou itself, I realized to myself that there were certain things on the sporting front that was not quite there. You know, it showed how far behind they were to where I had just come from. So it was, because I resigned from the post I had working for the Grenada Football Association as their technical director, because their values and their their aim was not what I was, I can say, it was not the same vision. So it was either I returned back to my job in Australia, but a group of friends that I was coaching their children somehow convinced me to stay in Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique because of the work that I was actually doing amongst the children, their children. And hence, that's how I managed to stay. And through them and myself, we created the Grenada Sports and Wellbeing Foundation, basically to provide pathways for young children that are into sports that are not getting that opportunity. And I always remember one of my neighbors in London, in Fulham, saying to me, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. So that has always been my motto from since I was about 15. So hence, we formed the foundation. And through the foundation, we now create empowerment for young boys and young girls to actually fulfill their dreams in wanting to help them on that journey to become what they want to become. And through the sporting side of and aspects of it all, I realized to myself that not every children or not every child likes sports. They are all very creative. There's some of them that are very, very creative. So one day I thought to myself, I'll ask some of them about what they would like to do or what they would like to become later on in years. And some of them would say, oh, I would like to become a film producer. Or I would like to get into, engineering, music, or the creative arts, and various other subjects. So then that now started pushing me to get more involved in the cultural aspects of stuff, not that I didn't know before. Because as you mentioned, I come from a very traditional family of people who are very creative themselves. And one in particular was my uncle, Winston Fleary, which I'm sure that some of the people tuning in tonight would know of him. And I think from the age of 15, I used to sit and watch my uncle talk about the cultural side of coming from Carriacou and from our ancestry that came from Africa, but not really understanding what he was actually talking about and grasping what he was actually talking about. I just personally found him to be a very interesting and a very educated man, so, and I would always be very excited for when I met him or when he came over to London to visit. And I remember one time he came over and I saw him in this lovely African outfit. And, I asked him, what he was wearing. And then he told me what it was. And by that time, I would have been about 18 or 19. And that's when I then started to truly understand what he was talking about and to see the journey of where he was going. But later on in life, I was still young, so you get sidetracked. But not until I remember at one stage, he came to London with all these drummers and dancers, and some of them stayed at our house, and I was wondering, what's all these people doing here? And not unknown to me, then he told me what was going to happen, and he was going to put on this play and this festival of drums and dancing of the African culture, which was called the Big Drum Nation, at one of the most prestigious theaters in London. And I think it was one of the first Black productions that theater ever held, at the Dominion Theatre in Tottenham Court Road. And in attendance that night was the royal family. They were there. And, you know, as a young kid, you're turning around to see if the Queen is there or whoever's there, you know. And it was one of the most beautiful occasions, I can say, of my life, to see what he achieved on that night, to several acclaims and encores that night. And so when I returned to Carriacou, I then had to say, I started getting more involved in and looking and paying more attention to the cultural side of what goes on in Carriacou because of what he achieved. And there were many times that the two of us would sit and talk about, you know, certain subjects in life. You know, he would talk about our ancestry, of where we actually came from in Africa and our lineage. And, you know, I must admit, some of our cousins, you know, they thought it was just a fairy tale. And, you know, because that was the kind of person he was. He would take a subject and he would dramatize it, but dramatize it in such a way that made you understand what it was about. You know, he wasn't dull and boring. You know, he was very eccentric and in his ways. And I think growing up, he was somebody that I wanted to be. You know, that I looked up at. You know, there was three men in my life that I must say that influenced me a great deal. One, my father. Second, my uncle Winston. And thirdly, another uncle of mine named Cosnell McIntosh. They were the three figures in my life. And also, I had an older uncle who was my dad's uncle, named Leonard McIntosh. That's five. They guided me to the person that I am now.
As somebody who has both been a learner and later a master and teacher of sports, and
Yeah.
then of these cultural traditions, of other cultural traditions, I should say, do you see a parallel in those processes, you know, of learning and then passing on to younger people?
Yes, because I know some people don't really see, but sports is culture. Playing football is a dance. I remember once someone described this footballer as a ballerina because of the way he ran and the way he turned. So it's culture. So by me coming back and it was always, what would I say? I've always had aspirations of coming back to Carriacou. And I always felt to myself that when I was younger that I didn't really achieve my full potential. But as I got older, I then started to embark on that a lot more. And yes, I achieved quite a lot. And then by me then saying to myself, I've always wanted to go back and give something back to young children, and hence, as I said, that's one of the main reasons why I set up the foundation. And thus far, we are doing very, very well. When I look back on where we actually started to where we are now, we have made magnificent strides, not only in sports, but also on the cultural aspects of what we're looking to do in the future.
Tell us about some of the programs that you are teaching and working with, sports as well as other cultural aspects.
Well, right now, we started up a media studio to teach the young children who are not into sports, that side of the creative industry. So sitting right now is the media studio that we've created through the help of some very generous people, by donating a lot of the equipment that we have to teach the children about the creative industry. And thus far, we produced our very first program about 4 weeks ago. And because I realized in Grenada, they love sports, but they don't really have a platform to take it to the next level. So we created a football channel on YouTube. So we do a weekly show so that the children can watch live, and they can send in their comments, and we will read it out live and answer some of the questions they ask. But also, we realized to ourselves that us in Grenada don't really have a weekly or a monthly art and culture show. So we're about to start our very first art and culture show tomorrow. We're about to launch it, to go live, because this week in Carriacou is what we call Maroon Festival, where we give back and talk about the ancestry of where we actually come from in Africa. So there'll be a lot of cultural activities going on, which we are going to film. Two of the young children I'm going to give them some cameras and go out with it and film and document the festival. And I hope they come back with, knowing them, they will come back with something very good, very interesting. A lot of content.
Is this something that you'll be able to share publicly, or?
I will be sharing it with you guys.
Fabulous.
It will be content for you guys to share.
Oh, can't wait to see it. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
It occurs to me we should probably go back a little bit and well, a big bit actually. And let me ask you, just for those in the audience who may not know much about Carriacou, excuse me, just tell us a bit about the place itself, how it relates to Grenada, Petit Martinique.
Carriacou is 13 square miles. It is one of the most picturesque islands and one of the most, how could I say, laid back islands that I've ever been to in my life. I've been out to islands in the South Pacific, and they're more forward thinking than we are here, and there are sometimes I get a bit frustrated because they are just so laid back. But then you have to learn that life sometimes is not a rush. And over the years, I have learned that. And for those that have not been here, it is also a very cultural and traditional island that I would say strayed but fought between the French and the English and over many years. So when you come here, there's a great diversity of people that live here. Some of the areas that are on the island are French and English. Now, I live in an area called Mount Pleasant. And for some reason, people in Mount Pleasant, my surname came from McIntosh. They were like, if history is correct, the landowners here, and the slavery names and stuff came about. And I must also say, one of the beaches here is called Paradise Beach, has been voted one of the best beaches in the Caribbean. So if you like to come and relax, I would recommend you go to that beach. On Sunday, I will be filming from that beach, because that is where the last session of the Maroon Festival takes part. So you would actually see the beauty of this beach. So I'm asking all of you to come. I see Becky's online, and I know Becky knows all about Paradise Beach. She loves it. She just loves Carriacou anyway. Recently, Becky was here, and we met for the first time. So Carriacou is very unique in itself. From Grenada, Grenada also has its beauty. As everyone knows, we're called the Isle of Spice. I think they're the third largest producer of spice around the world. And then we move on to Petit Martinique. Petit Martinique is well known for, along with a certain area in Carriacou called Windward, for boat building. So I don't know if anyone has seen a documentary about the boat building called Vanishing Sails. I recommend it, and I think you would learn a great deal of how the traditional schooners were built up between Windward and Petit Martinique. And another thing that people would not know, for the majority of the fish that comes in Grenada waters that make it to your plate in America or in Europe, the fishermen from Petit Martinique are like your tuna fish that you get. They are the main guys that go out on their fishing boats and bring back these huge tunas to then be sold to market, like that up in Martinique, in Guadeloupe, and makes its way to you guys in America. I remember once going to, I think for Finland, and walking past this fish stall, and there I saw a sign saying tuna from Grenada's waters. I touched my friend and said, have you seen what's there? That's how unique this place is. That's how unique it is. It is a fantastic island. And I encourage that if you have not been before, take a time out and come and visit.
That is something
See
I'm
the
very much looking
uniqueness
forward
of it.
to.
Yes, and the culturalness of it and the diversity.
It strikes me as a geographically small place, physically small, but culturally huge. I mean, it sounds like a
Massive,
real incredible depth of
massive.
very,
I think
very
this is the
different
only,
traditions too.
yeah, this is the only island, I think, outside of Africa that still traditionally maintains its big drum heritage. And I think also it's one of the only islands that participate in Shakespeare Masque, you know, and we all know about Shakespeare and what he is,
Mhm.
and to traditionally see these young children and participate in talking all about Shakespeare is fantastic, and that's also a cultural experience that if you're coming, you must know the time of the year that you're going to come to experience this.
I would like to ask you to talk more about Shakespeare Mask and also about the Big Drum Nation. I've got a clip here that if I can get
Yeah,
the screen share to work here, which is sometimes a dubious thing with me. Let me see if I can do this. I have a clip from a big drums ceremony some years
yeah,
back that was directed by John Bishop, involved your uncle Winston Fleury. I'm
yeah,
sure many other family members of yours. Producers included Naomi Bishop and Anna Lomax Wood.
yeah.
So Ace was very honored to be associated with this. I am going to play just a few moments of this, and then hopefully you can tell us a bit about what was going on at that moment in this particular scene. Just a very small clip of what I'm sure is um, a detail of a much larger
Yes,
happening. But
yes.
tell us a bit about it, about the general tradition of
Well,
Big Drum Nation.
that is a tradition that when someone dies, or they have what we call a stone feast, or the night before a burial, you know, everyone would come together to honor that person by playing the drums and dancing. Um, that particular clip you showed, and let me say, thank you for John Bishop for and Alan and Anna for putting all of this together. You know what they did and what they achieved here in Carriacou was magnificent, along with my uncle Winston. You know, but going back to that clip that you played, that particular stone feast was for a woman who danced with Uncle Winston called Lucian Duncan. I remember that woman coming to my house to stay when he put on that concert at the Dominion Theatre. She was very tall, and to actually see this woman dance, if you can imagine a peacock when it opens up its feathers so gracefully, this is what she was. She was so tall and so graceful and elegant when she did that dance. And in that clip is one of her granddaughters. She's dressed in white, dancing in that clip, you know? And so it's a tradition where they honor the dead, and they traditionally go back to the African heritage. And I won't say it's raising the dead, but you know, it's a tradition of giving back to the soil of where we actually came from.
Within those traditions and also just day-to-day life, what does that connection to ancestors feel like? Is that something that's experienced just in regular mundane
Well,
activities of life, or is
yeah.
only in ceremonies?
Well, for me, it takes me back to my African heritage, and I have to say that I had the privilege of going to an African country and doing some some work there for a certain short period, and watching and listening to what you just played, and listening to my uncle Winston, it was true. It brought me back to reality. It brought me back to where our traditions come from. And it's these traditions is what we should actually be encouraging and teaching our children, because they need to know where they came from. They need to learn and preserve what these cultures are, because back then that was our way of life, and it still can be our way of life. If yes, we may have now telephones, we now have internet that's moved on in such a way, but we could use internet, we could use Google, we can use whatever TikTok, whatever it is, to actually go back and research. So it's now easier for children to actually get into Google or whatever format they want to use to actually understand what the big drum culture is all about, and our heritage in what and how we came here, and for them to understand it more. They would have they if they go and Google now, they would understand it even more than what chance I had, because the chances I had was word of mouth. Sometimes you believe it or sometimes you don't. But now you can actually go in there. For us, would have had to go to the library to go and find it. And some of the libraries in the UK that you went to go and look for such things, you'd have never found it. So they've got a better opportunity to actually get to know more than what we know.
That's such a, to me, refreshing and unusual spin on traditional arts online. Because so often, in certain kinds of traditional music, say, people will sort of lament that, nowadays kids go to YouTube and learn their fiddle tunes or whatever the art might be. Whereas before I learned it knee to knee, they would say, with an older fiddler, my uncle so and so.
Yeah,
But I love that view that you just expressed, that there is actually a wealth of knowledge available to them now that wasn't
yeah,
available a generation earlier, two generations earlier. That's,
yes,
I mean, it's so much more
yeah,
positive and forward looking a way to regard technology and tradition, I
yeah.
think.
Because you think about it. I remember when my uncle was telling me a story once of two gentlemen on the island. You know, one was a strings player called Canute Callis. And, you know, traditionally, to see how that man played the violin or any string instrument, who would have taught him? You know, who would have taught him? And then you get into the drumming side. You know, who would have taught these people? Now, Sugar Adams, the greatest drummer that ever come out of Carriacou, who would have taught him? Now you can go on social on YouTube, and you can actually teach yourself how to play the violin, or how to go and play and learn the traditional drums by just sitting there with a drum in front of a screen and learning and watching and learning to play. You know, you take someone like Uncle Winston, how he learned, and the various other people that were involved back in New York when they formed the Big Drum Nation. You know, their vision was so inspiring to actually later on come back to Carriacou to carry on those traditions. So amongst those that created the Big Drum Nation, to actually come back here and to come tomorrow at the Maroon Festival to actually see the tradition still being preserved in such a way, which I must say, it slowly gets dying out, but it needs for us now to keep it alive and keep it going, to encourage our children, and also for the schools. It should also be taught within the schools as a curriculum, as a music, within music, you know, so they can actually learn this tradition, which I think that it is a must in order for us to keep the culture of these certain arts alive.
Do you find, as someone from Carriacou and a tradition bearer, but who has lived all over the world, do you find that your community's traditions are also carried on in the Carriacouan diaspora, or you know, is the heart of it still where it originated?
In the diaspora, you can go anywhere in London, and you can see the tradition alive, because London is such a diverse city that you've got so many people from all different walks of life living in London, especially from Africa, or you know, you get people from South America playing the drum, big drum. You walk down in a subway and you see a guy beating a drum, you know. But when you come here, it is not very often that you will see someone sitting in town, in the middle of town, beating a drum. You know, it would have to be at some special occasion. You know, I would like to see a group of guys, you know, in town every day doing Shakespeare masque, or reading Shakespeare, or playing the drum, or doing the, you know, the traditional dancing. But we don't really see that unless it's a special occasion.
In terms of the wider Caribbean diaspora, I was struck recently, was watching a video of family members of yours presenting, I believe, cooking for an ancestor ceremony. This was on Facebook. I don't know how this was. It looked like it was maybe 15 years ago.
They were cooking a tradition that they call Saraka.
That was it.
Saraka is a tradition that came over from, you know, many years with our ancestries from Africa, where everything's cooked for in tradition, as we say, for different occasions, especially cooked around Maroon festivals. So you would have, they would, you know, have meat in the pots, maybe lamb, maybe goat, maybe, you know, beef. I can't remember them even having fish. It's usually a lot of meat and all the traditional trimmings that goes with it. You know, rolled rice, rolled what they called a dish they called Kaku, which is corn made out of cornmeal. You know, or how can I say, maybe you may know it as polenta. You know, and they would have what they would call stew peas, which is grown in their gardens. And if you are visiting, I think that you should come around that time, because every village has its turn within a maroon, and that's the traditional dish in what they cook.
Sounds wonderful. So it's sort of a progressive from village to village.
Yes,
Wonderful.
you see these big pots on these big stones with firewood underneath it. You see the men turning the meat, and the women are probably cooking the kaku and rolling it along with rolled rice. And I will tell you now that the majority of the island turns up. They feed the majority of the island. You know, and if you think about it, that within a week or a couple of months, you can go to one of those every Friday. Every Friday somewhere, or for a whole week somewhere. You'll be going to a different one. Even on top of that, at a funeral. You know, there was 2 funerals, and I didn't attend, but I'm guaranteed that that's what they did. That is a tradition on its own.
In that particular video, one thing that that I found really interesting and wonderful was in the comment section. First, there was a person from Sierra Leone saying, "Oh, this is
Yes.
exactly what my family does." Or
Yes.
maybe one little variation. And then the
Yes.
next comment was somebody from Belize saying, "My
Yeah.
Garifuna family does something so similar. It's this, that, and the other." And
Yeah.
I love how social media in particular can be sort of a gathering place for traditions, traditional arts,
Yeah.
folklore, and comparing and sharing.
Yes. I remember going out to Tonga in the Pacific Ocean, the Kingdom of Tonga. And I was putting on a coaching session out there. And then there was this massive food festival going on. And I was walking through, myself and some of the other guys, and we saw these big pots. They were so huge. Well, anyone who knows Tonga and Samoa, those guys are big guys, solid big guys. And to see them I would honestly say they were using an oar that you use for rowing to turn the kaku. So I peeped in this pot, and the gentleman looked at me, and then he asked me, "Do I know what that is?" And then I turned around and told him what it was, and explained to him that's also one of our tradition. He was so surprised that when I told him that this tradition that they are doing, it is also being practiced where I come from in the Caribbean. Same thing. Even if you go out to Brazil, in Brasilia, the same. So it's that there again, that's where our ancestries all come from. It's, not many people know that during slavery times, some of the people that were dropped off of the boats and picked up, they took round to that part of the world and never recorded. Yeah. So it shows that tradition is still out in those islands in the Pacific around there.
We are coming up on towards the end of the hour, and I have so many things I want to ask you, but I also want to make sure that
You'd
you
have to
have
do another show.
I know, yeah, that would be wonderful. We'd love that. Just want to make sure that you have some additional time to tell us more about current activities of your foundation and how, people watching tonight and also watching this video later on when it's posted to social media, how they can learn more about your foundation.
You could learn more of our foundation. I would read it out. The website, www.Grenada Sports wellbeing.org, O-R-G. And you can learn more about what we do as a foundation in terms of creating opportunities for young children, not only in sports, but also empowerment in what we do for them. As I say, we started off as a sporting foundation, but then we realized to ourselves the need of creating the arts and cultural side of it. And basically, I created the actual arts and culture side in honor of my uncle Winston Fleary, to carry on his legacy and his tradition. And because he was a very creative man, he was very much in the creative industry. You know, to me, he was an absolute pioneer for what he and others created. You know, so if you want to know more about the foundation, you can reach out through the website, and you can. And is it okay if I leave my number? Because I live in Carriacou, you'd have to contact me on +1 473 422 4920. So feel free to call me at any time. And if you want to help in such a way, or I would say donate to the foundation to help to help the cause of what we actually do, we'll be very, very grateful for your help in any way, form, for what we're doing with the children.
Wonderful. And we will post all these links as well, and make sure that these are shared widely. What have we not covered this evening that you'd like to be sure to bring into the conversation?
Pardon?
What have we not talked about that you'd like to be sure to talk about before we say goodnight?
Well, as I said, I would seriously like to thank my family for being so patient with me over the many years, for my diverseness and my how would I say, creativeness. And especially my sister, she has been very, very patient. My mother also. And there were many times where I thought to myself, what am I doing here? You know, because I became so very frustrated over the years. And my sister in general would always be there saying to me and giving me advice on which way I should turn and which way I should maneuver myself to create what we have done now. I thank her. And I thank all the others that have guided me to where I am in my life, in giving back to these wonderful young children in Carriacou, Grenada, and Petit Martinique. Yes.
What guidance do you have for those for the upcoming generations who want to do some of the things that you do?
I would like to say to them, if you can dream it, you could achieve it, and stick on the path that you really want to go. Because we all have a dream, but it's how we then try to make that dream a reality. So never let anyone say to yourself, you can't do it. You can. You can. You can achieve it. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but you will eventually, if you set your mind to it, you will achieve it. You know, I got a friend, and when she started off telling me about her wanting to do a PhD, I said to her, don't be frightened. You will achieve what you want to achieve. But you got to put your mind to it. She has 2 weeks left to achieve her dreams and finish her PhD to later on become Dr. So-and-so. So we all can achieve something.
Well, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in and will tune in later on when we post this video. Trevor, thank you for
Thank
your
you. Thank you.
and your family's
Thank you.
long partnerships with us at ACE. It's they're so important to us and do us honor, and we thank you for that as well.
And thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed my evening.
So did I.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody. Have a
Yes.
good night.
Good night.